Here in the Northeast, because of the consolidation of the dairy industry, there are many dairy barns that now sit idle, dark, and empty. Fortunately, many have found new life as part of a non-dairy livestock enterprise, be that beef, small ruminants, or in this case, swine production. Through this series of videos, we are highlighting the efforts of some livestock farmers to reimagine how these barns can be utilized. Though in various stages of updating, upgrading, remodeling, and/or retrofitting, they are transforming these facilities into successful hog operations. As you watch these videos, it might be helpful to remember that no two farms are alike, and no two farms have the same goals. What works well on one farm may not be so productive on another. Our goal is to spark thoughtful consideration on how you can transform your enterprise into an economically and environmentally sustainable operation. Hello, my name is Tim Terry, and I am the Farmstead Strategic Planning Specialist from Cornell University with the Pro Dairy team. Part of my job is working with farmers to retrofit and repurpose old buildings to be used for new enterprises. In this case, what we have today is a mid to late 19th century structure that the owner is looking to convert from a dairy to a swine enterprise. And we're going to walk through the building, we're going to look at what's in there, we're going to evaluate what we have, and then we're going to make some recommendations on what could possibly be done with this facility. All right, the first room we've come in today is what used to be the milk house. Now, probably what was in here, you'd have a bulk tank along this wall, maybe some wash vat and other washing, sanitizing area back along here. This is very typical of what you'd probably find in this room. You know, a lot of color, a lot of odds and ends, this, that, and the other thing. But if you can see beyond that, here we have the potential for a really nice office. Very easy to bring in a desk, add some lighting. It's generally going to be a little bit warmer, a little more protected, so you aren't going to deal with the weather, with the other animal smells. You could bring in a refrigerator and some cabinets. You've got a good, safe place to keep your pharmaceuticals and other items in there. It just needs a little TLC. Okay, now we've moved out into the main part of the barn. And where we are is kind of along the outside wall in front of where the cattle would be. And what we have down here is actually the manger. And this is where the animals would be fed. So I figure their silages, their grains, their dry hay would all go in here. It's recessed like this so that it would keep the feed always in front of the animal. Now the animal would have stuck their head through a gate system like this, or maybe what you've seen before are some of the old stanchions that would come up and sort of wrap around their neck a little bit. Now, if we're looking at this for a potential swine facility, probably this would get knocked out, this would get knocked out, and we would pour a whole new floor from here on out so that we'd have a nice level uniform surface to put the pens on. All right, here we are in the stall bed area. Now, we've already talked a little bit about what we're gonna do with the manger up here, with the gating that's already here, the curb and whatnot. We talked about taking those out. Now, what are we gonna put in its place? Well, we go back to the gutter that we have here. We're gonna pour a new slab, slope it up 2 to 3% all the way to the front of that manger. Now we're gonna have a nice uniform slope to set up our stall dividers for our gestation stalls, for our farrowing crates, and any other gating that we need to put in there to separate our groups. Now we're in the middle of the barn. Two of the most important factors when we're figuring a retrofit is the building width and what's underneath, in other words, the flooring. These post and beam buildings, you know, if the footers and the posts are good, they're very strong, very stable. One thing we don't want to do, of course, is anything to compromise that, but we can make use of these buildings quite easily. On these old post and beam barns, quite often what you'll find is widths of 36, 39, or 42. Kind of goes back to the rule of thirds. They've got a third on one side, third on the other, third in the middle. So it's 12, 12, and 12, 13, 13, and 13, 14, 14, and 14. This barn is actually unusually wide. It's 45 feet wide. It's actually a little more than 45 feet wide, which again is not typical. However, we can use that to our advantage. Now we have enough room for a 7 or 8 foot farrowing pen, gestation stall, whatever grouping size we want to use. Plus we've got room along the outside walls that we can do feeding, do some veterinary work, just inspect the animals a little bit closer. The flooring under here, you typically are going to find concrete, maybe you might find dirt. With a concrete, quite often what you're going to find are the gutters that run the length of the building. That's actually to your advantage because we can build platforms for these stalls such that the dunging and whatnot ends up out of the stall and down into the gutter. Again, leaving that front end high and dry so the animal has a nice place to lie. All right, let's talk lighting in these old facilities. Now, when these buildings were built, you got to remember that probably they did everything by lantern. So your milking, your feeding, everything was done by lantern. Today, of course, we have electric lights that we can use, and quite often you may have a lighting system already in there. Question is, does it provide enough light? How do we know? What we want to see, what we like to have is about 20-foot candles right at the animal that we're going to be working with. Maybe even pushing that as high as 50 because that's what we would call task lighting. Enough to be able to see detail as we're working with these animals. All right, now I may look pretty bright and pretty well lit right now, but let's have my videography team turn the lights off and you can see just exactly how dark it is in here. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, a little bit different, isn't it? So now we'll just turn them back on so you can see what's going on. Now we want to look at, okay, how can we light these buildings? Again, we want to shoot for that 20 to 50 foot candles right at the animal so we can see exactly what's going on with them, if we have to do any treatments, any other work that we may need to do with the animal or even with the equipment around the animal. Okay, another consideration, of course, is ventilation. How are we going to get fresh air in and out? You know, if I hold up this flag, you can see it's not moving much at all, which means we really don't have much ventilation in here right now. When these barns were built, it was not a consideration. I mean, they had windows, they might have had some holes in the wall. Again, we might have a door, and that's all they needed. The animals were not as big, the production levels were not as great, the demand for ventilation was not as great. But now, with the animals that we would have in here, the density, the nutrition that they would have, we need ventilation to have fresh air coming in. So the amount of ventilation we would like to see during the wintertime especially is about 4 to 6 air changes per hour. Now an air change means that we are going to totally evacuate this building and replenish it with fresh air 4 to 6 times per hour. So about every 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to have totally fresh air in here. During the summer, because things are a little bit warmer, we like to see that more in the line of 30 to 40 air changes per hour. And that means it's going to have to be a mechanical ventilation system. So we're looking at fans, may even be looking at tubes or other things to bring fresh air in and get the stale air out. Now, one more thing to consider is with the ventilation, if we don't have good natural ventilation, in other words, there's a way for fresh air to get in and stale air to get out, we may have to institute a mechanical ventilation system. Now, in order for that to work, again, we still have to have the inlets and outlets. Generally, that's going to be a fan on one side, and it's going to be properly sized inlets on the other side. Again, we want to have that air come in, mix with the air that's in, and then finds its way out through the fans.